Welcome to Stories with Grandma Celine. Today we peel back the veil on a story I call The Altar of Exchange. It is a tale for the grown, for those who have tasted the bitterness of a lover's treachery and wondered if God was still awake. We follow Felicia, a woman who built a kingdom with her sweat while her husband, Anthony, built a playground for strangers. From the high-end boutiques of Woos II to the betrayal that echoed through a POS machine, this is a journey of a star that was mocked and a divine relocation that turned a victim into a queen. Sit back and learn why you must never let a man's no become the final word over your destiny. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so. The smell of burnt onions filled the air in the Guerimper apartment. Felicia stood by the stove, her eyes stinging, not from the onions but from the weight of her bank balance. Across from her sat Anthony, draped in a silk bathrobe she had bought him last Christmas. He was scrolling through his phone, a smirk dancing on his lips. "Anthony, the shop is empty," Felicia said, her voice a low plea. "The customers in Abuja don't buy old stock. If I can just get 2 million Naira, I can bring in the new Italian collection. You promised me last month." Anthony didn't look up. "Felicia, I told you the government hasn't cleared our contract payments. Things are tight. Why are you so greedy? Use what you have." "What I have is a dying business, Anthony. I supported you for 3 years when you had nothing. Now you're driving a Mercedes and I'm begging for groceries." Anthony finally looked up, his eyes cold. "If the shop is dying, let it die. Maybe you should focus on being a wife instead of a CEO. I have a meeting. Don't bore me with money talk again." He stood up, leaving his half-eaten meal for her to clear. 2 hours later, Felicia was on the phone with her elder brother, Emeka, who lived in Toronto. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She told him about the government payment excuse and the coldness in Anthony's eyes. "Felicia, listen to me." Emeka's voice was firm, cutting through her tears. "I have watched you dim your light for that man for too long. He is not waiting for payment. He is waiting for you to fail so you can be under his thumb." "I don't know what to do, Emeka. I'm stuck." "No, you are not. Check your email. I just sent you 10 million Naira. Don't tell him. Don't ask him for a kobo. Buy your ticket to China and Italy tomorrow. Stock that shop like the queen you are. If Anthony wants a wife who begs, let him find one. You are a mogul." Felicia stared at the alert on her phone. The 10 million flashed like a holy fire. The tears stopped. The beggar died that afternoon. For the next 3 weeks, Felicia lived a double life. To Anthony, she was the obedient wife who had stopped asking for money. He assumed she had finally given up on her little hobby. He didn't notice her late-night calls to suppliers or the visa stamp in her passport. While Anthony was working late, or so he said, Felicia was on a plane to Guangzhou, then Milan. She didn't buy cheap, she bought exclusive. She curated a collection that Abuja had never seen, hand-beaded gowns and leather bags that whispered luxury. She renovated the shop in secret, using a team that worked through the night. She changed the name from Felicia's Fashion to the Altar Boutique. On the morning of the relaunch, she dressed in a simple wrap dress hidden under a trench coat. Anthony saw her leaving and mocked her. "Going to sell those dusty rags again? Good luck with that." Felicia only smiled. "God is awake, Anthony." By midday, the Altar Boutique was the talk of Woos II. The influencers had arrived, drawn by the mystery of the new gold-lettered sign. The air inside smelled of expensive oud and success. Felicia moved through the crowd, her hair perfectly coiffed, looking every bit the high-end CEO. Sales were astronomical. Women were swiping cards for items worth hundreds of thousands. Felicia felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had done this without Anthony's government money. Suddenly the door chimed. A young woman, barely 22, strutted in. She was dressed in a micro-mini skirt and carried a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Behind her, 2 of her friends giggled, filming her for Snapchat. "This place is okay," the girl said loudly, touching a 500K Italian silk gown with manicured nails. "My sugar daddy told me to spoil myself today. He says I'm too pretty to wear anything local." Felicia watched from the shadows of the VIP lounge, a strange feeling rising in her chest. The young girl, whose name was Cynthia, began piling clothes onto the counter. She chose the most expensive pieces Felicia had brought back from Milan. "Make sure you pack them well," Cynthia barked at the sales girl. "My man doesn't like his gifts wrinkled. He just bought me a new Lexus, you know. He's a big man in Abuja. He works with the government." The sales girl looked at Felicia nervously. Felicia stepped forward, a polite, professional smile on her face. "You have great taste, miss. That will be 1.2 million Naira." Cynthia laughed, a high-pitched, grating sound. Money is not the problem. My man gave me his corporate card. He told me he just got a big alert today and I should spend it all. She reached into her Dior bag and pulled out a sleek black corporate card. Felicia's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the sticker on the back, a small silver eagle. It was the card from the joint business account Anthony had told her was frozen and empty only weeks ago. The air in the boutique suddenly felt thin. Felicia stared at the black card held between Cynthia's fingers. She knew every digit of that card number by heart. She had been the one to fill out the paperwork at the bank 3 years ago, back when she and Anthony were a team. "Is there a problem?" Cynthia asked, waving the card impatiently. "Or is your machine as local as your face?" Felicia didn't flinch. She took the card with a steady hand. "No problem at all, I just want to ensure the connection is strong for such a significant purchase." She stepped behind the marble counter and slotted the card into the POS terminal. As the machine dialed, Felicia's phone, tucked into her pocket, began to vibrate. It was a rhythmic, aggressive buzz. She reached down and pulled it out. "Alert, debit NGN 1,200,000. Account 102XXXX890, Crown and Altar Limited. Location, the Altar Boutique, Abuja." The merchant name on her phone was her own shop, but the source of the funds was the account Anthony claimed was stone dry. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial. He was feeding his mistress with the very capital he denied his wife. Felicia felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over her. She remembered the day they opened that account. Anthony had begged her to be the primary signatory because his credit score was poor. "It's your business, baby," he had lied then. "I'm just here to help." "The transaction is taking a while," Cynthia complained, checking her reflection in the gold-trimmed mirror. "Maybe my man should just buy me this whole shop so I don't have to wait for slow service." Felicia looked up, her eyes like flint. Actually, the transaction didn't just go through, it sent a very loud notification to the owner's phone. Cynthia smirked. "Yeah, my daddy is probably smiling right now seeing how much I'm spending. He loves it when I'm expensive." "Does he?" Felicia asked softly. She tapped her phone screen, opening her banking app. With 3 swift clicks, she navigated to card management and hit the red button, freeze all cards. The POS machine emitted a long, mournful beep. The screen flashed in bold, block letters, transaction DECLINED, card frozen. Cynthia's jaw dropped. "What, try it again? That's impossible, there's millions in there." "I did try," Felicia said, sliding the card back across the counter. "It seems the daddy you are referring to has lost his spending privileges. The primary owner of this account has restricted access." "You don't know who you're talking to," Cynthia screamed, her face turning a blotchy red. She grabbed her phone and speed-dialed a contact saved as My King. She put it on speaker, wanting to humiliate Felicia. After 2 rings, a familiar, deep voice answered. "Baby, did you get the dresses? I'm just pulling into the Mall parking lot." Felicia's breath hitched. Anthony was here in the same building. "Anthony," Cynthia wailed into the phone, her voice dripping with fake tears. "This woman at the boutique is insulting me. She says your card is frozen. She's trying to embarrass me in front of my friends." "What? Who is that? Hold on, I'm coming in right now. Nobody embarrasses my girl." The door to the Altar Boutique swung open with a bang. Anthony marched in, wearing a bespoke suit that Felicia had dry-cleaned for him only 2 days ago. He looked powerful, angry, and completely blindsided. He didn't look at the racks, he didn't look at the decor. He went straight for Cynthia, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Who is the manager here? I will have this place shut down. Do you know how much?" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes finally traveled to the woman standing behind the counter. The woman in the emerald silk dress. The woman he had left at home in a dusty wrap dress. "Felicia," he whispered, his face turning the color of ash. The silence in the boutique was deafening. The influencers had stopped talking. The staff held their breath. "Hello, Anthony," Felicia said, her voice calm and regal. "I thought you were at a government meeting in the secretariat. I didn't realize the secretariat moved to the luxury wing of the Mall." Cynthia looked from Anthony to Felicia, her confusion turning into a slow, ugly realization. "Anthony, who is this? Why is she calling you by name?" Felicia stepped around the counter, holding the frozen black card. "I'm the woman who built the house you sleep in, the woman who pays the car note for the Mercedes you're driving, and the woman who just blocked this card." She turned to Cynthia, tossing the card at her feet. You wanted to be expensive, right? Well, the bill just came due. And unfortunately for you, your king is just a tenant in my kingdom. Anthony tried to speak, but Felicia held up a hand. Don't, not here. You have 60 seconds to take your guest and leave my shop before I call Mal security to escort out 2 thieves. The Mal security didn't need to be called. The humiliation was heavy enough to act as a physical weight. Anthony looked at the faces of the shoppers, the same people he had tried to impress with his big man persona, and saw them filming. The red light of a smartphone camera was the only thing shining on him now. Felicia, please, let's talk in the office, Anthony hissed, his voice cracking. You're making a scene. A scene, Felicia laughed, and it was a cold, melodic sound that chilled Anthony to the bone. You brought the scene to my doorstep, Anthony. I just provided the lighting. Cynthia, realizing the sugar had officially left her daddy, grabbed her designer bag, the one Felicia now knew was bought with her own stolen funds, and turned on Anthony. You told me you were a widower. You told me she died in a car crash. I am dead, Felicia interrupted, looking Cynthia dead in the eye. The woman who slaved for him is buried. You're looking at the woman who inherited the estate. Now get out. Cynthia fled, her heels clicking frantically against the marble. Anthony stood alone, a king without a throne, as Felicia turned her back to him to assist a real customer. Anthony didn't go to the office. He went to the house in Guarimpa, driving like a man possessed. He needed to get to the safe. He needed to get his documents. If Felicia was going to play dirty, he would take the house. It was in his name, or so he believed. But when he arrived at the gate, the remote didn't work. He pressed it again and again, the plastic clicking uselessly. He stepped out of the car and pounded on the pedestrian gate. Musa, Musa, open this gate, he screamed for the security guard. The small viewing window slid open. Musa's face appeared, but he didn't look afraid. He looked pitying. Ogre Anthony, madam, give order. She say make I tell you say your things day for the road. Anthony turned around. There, stacked neatly against the perimeter wall, were 10 black garbage bags. On top of the bags sat his silk bathrobes, his expensive shoes, and a single framed photo of himself, the glass shattered. While Anthony was screaming at a closed gate in Guarimpa, Felicia was sitting in a quiet office in Maitama. Across from her sat barrister Otto, a man who looked like he was carved out of mahogany and legal statutes. He thinks the house is his, barrister, Felicia said, sipping a cup of bitter tea. The lawyer smiled, sliding a folder across the desk. He forgot that when he used the company funds to pay the mortgage, he signed the director's resolution. Since you own 90% of Crown and Alta Limited, and he was merely an operations manager on paper, the house is a corporate asset. And today the board, which is you and your brother, voted to liquidating his housing allowance. What about the cars? The Mercedes is a lease under the company. I've already sent the repo team. By the time he finishes shouting at the gate, he'll be looking for a bus stop. Felicia felt a twinge of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by the memory of the government payment lie. He had watched her struggle for grocery money while he paid for Cynthia's Lexus. The sadness died instantly. Anthony spent the evening in a cheap hotel near the bus park, the smell of stale cigarettes and regret filling the room. His phone was dead. His cards were useless plastic. He had managed to save one thing, a spare key to Felicia's boutique. He waited until 2 a.m. He convinced himself that if he could just get in, take the cash from the day's sales and maybe some of the high-end bags, he could disappear to Lagos and start over. The streets of Wus II were quiet. He slipped to the back entrance of the mall using his knowledge of the delivery routes. He reached the boutique door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He slid the key in. It turned clicky. He stepped into the darkness, the scent of the oud perfume still lingering. He moved toward the counter, his hands shaking. But as he reached for the drawer, the lights didn't just turn on, they blinded him. Felicia wasn't alone. She was sitting in the same velvet chair she had used for the VIPs, a glass of water in her hand. Beside her stood 2 uniformed police officers and barrister Otto. I knew you'd come for the cash, Anthony, Felicia said, her voice echoing in the empty shop. You always did prefer the shortcut to the hard work. Felicia, I just came to get my things, Anthony stammered, dropping the crowbar he hadn't realized he was holding. With a crowbar, at 2, and the barrister stepped forward. Mr. Anthony, you are currently trespassing on corporate property with intent to commit a felony, but more importantly, we've spent the evening looking at the books. The 5 million naira you moved last month to an offshore account. That's money laundering and embezzlement. Felicia stood up, walking toward him. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she had built a life for, and realized he was small. He had always been small. You wanted an altar of exchange, Anthony, she whispered. You wanted to trade my hard work for your pleasure. Now the exchange is complete. You get the cell and I get the kingdom. The iron door of the Karu police station didn't slam. It groaned, a metallic rasp that signaled the end of Anthony's big man era. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sweat and unwashed despair. Anthony sat on the cold floor, his bespoke suit, now wrinkled and stained, clashing violently with the grime of the walls. He reached for his phone, forgetting for the 10th time that it had been confiscated. He wanted to call Cynthia. He wanted her to tell him it was a mistake, that she loved him for his soul and not the black card. But deep down, he knew Cynthia didn't even know his last name. She only knew the name of the bank account he had pillaged. In the corner, an inmate chuckled. Hey, CEO, why your face be like say you see ghost? This place no get VIP section oh. Anthony closed his eyes, but all he saw was Felicia's face under the bright lights of the boutique. She hadn't looked angry, she had looked finished. He realized then that a woman's silence is far more dangerous than her screaming. When she was screaming, she was still fighting for him. Now that she was silent, she was only fighting for herself. The next morning, Felicia didn't go to the police station. She went to the boutique. She sat on the floor of her office, surrounded by bank statements that Barrister Otto had highlighted in yellow and red. The red marks were the leaks, the hotel stays in Transcorp Hilton when he said he was in Kaduna, the luxury spa days for C Baby, the jewelry purchases from stores Felicia would never dream of entering. Madam, her shop assistant Joy whispered, leaning in with a tray of tea. The news is everywhere. They are calling you the Iron Lady of Woos. Some people are saying you were too harsh. Felicia took a sip of the tea, the bitterness grounding her. Joy, when a man burns the roof over your head to keep his mistress warm, you don't ask if the rain is too cold for him. You just make sure your own house is fireproof. She looked at a specific transaction, a wire transfer to a travel agency. 2 tickets to Seychelles. Date, next week. He was planning a honeymoon with her sweat while she was planning how to pay the shop's electricity bill. The phone rang. It was Emeka, her brother in Toronto. Felicia, I saw the videos. Abuja is vibrating with your name, he said, his voice a mix of pride and concern. But listen, the dust needs to settle. You've won the battle, but don't stay in the graveyard. The shop in Woos is great, but I've been talking to some partners here in Ontario. Felicia leaned back, staring at the gold-lettered logo on her wall, the altar. Partners for what, Emeka? For a flagship store, Felicia. The African luxury market is exploding here. You have the inventory, you have the eye, and now you have the freedom. Why stay where people only know you as Anthony's wife who fought back? Come to where they will only know you as the CEO of a global brand. The word global tasted better than revenge. Felicia looked at the sky through her window. The Abuja sun was harsh, but she suddenly felt a craving for the Canadian snow. Felicia made a decision that shocked the Abuja fashion circle. She didn't keep the boutique. She announced a divine relocation sale. Everything must go, the flyers read. The altar is moving. For 3 days the shop was a battlefield of women looking for deals. Felicia watched them. She saw women who were exactly where she had been a year ago, hiding their pain behind expensive handbags. To some of them she whispered advice: keep your own account, sign your own name. By the final evening the racks were bare. The marble floor was dusty. The gold hangers were gone. She had converted her Abuja empire into liquid gold, dollars and euros, safely tucked into her brother's account. She walked through the empty space, her footsteps echoing. She stopped at the POS counter. She touched the spot where she had stood when she saw the alert. That machine was the altar where she had sacrificed her marriage, and in exchange she had found her soul. Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport was bustling. Felicia stood at the check-in counter, a single carry-on bag in her hand. Her heavy luggage had already been shipped to Toronto. She checked her phone one last time. A message from Barrister Otto. Anthony's family is begging for a settlement. They say he is depressed in the cell. Felicia typed back, tell them to use the money from the Seychelles tickets to buy him a therapist. I am no longer the bank or the wife. I am the traveller. She hit send and blocked the number. As she walked toward the boarding gate, she felt a tap on her shoulder. It was a woman, perhaps in her 60s, wearing a simple Ankara wrapper and a wise smile. Safe journey, my daughter, the woman said. You are leaving with more than just bags, you are leaving with your crown. Don't let the cold of the north make you forget the fire you carried in the south. Felicia smiled, the first real deep smile in years. Thank you, Grandma. She stepped onto the plane. As the wheels left the Abuja tarmac, Felicia looked down at the city lights. Below her was a man in a cell and a mistress in a car she couldn't afford to fuel. In front of her was a horizon she finally owned. The doors of Pearson International Airport slid open, and a wall of icy Canadian air hit Felicia's face. It was a sharp, biting cold, the kind that makes you feel alive because it hurts. She stood there for a moment, her breath blooming like white smoke in the air. Felicia, over here. Emeka stood by his SUV, wrapped in a heavy wool coat, waving frantically. As she climbed into the car, the heater blasted her skin, but her heart remained at a steady, cool rhythm. Welcome to Ontario, sis, Emeka said, checking his mirrors. Abuja is 10,000 miles away. Here, nobody cares whose wife you were. They only care about what's in your head and what's in your heart. Felicia looked out at the snow-covered pines lining the highway. It was beautiful, silent, and intimidating. In Abuja, she was a legend. Here, she was just another woman in a stylish coat. But as she watched the Canadian flag fluttering in the wind, she realized that being a nobody was the greatest gift she could have received. It was a blank canvas. The global brand didn't start in a high-rise in downtown Toronto. It started in Emeka's finished basement in Mississauga. Felicia sat among stacks of Italian leather and hand-woven Aso oak she had shipped from Nigeria. The transition wasn't easy. The Canadian fashion industry was a closed circle of minimalist designs and neutral colors. Felicia's vibrant, structured altar pieces were considered too loud by the first few boutique owners she approached. It's beautiful work, one woman in Yorkville told her, pushing a beaded jacket back toward her. But our clients prefer quiet luxury. This is a lot of noise. Felicia walked back to the bus stop, her toes numb from the freezing slush. She remembered Anthony's voice. You look like a market girl sometimes. For a split second, she wondered if he was right. Then she shook her head. They don't want quiet luxury, she whispered to the falling snow. They just haven't heard a story worth listening to yet. Instead of begging the established boutiques, Felicia used the last of her liquid cash to rent a small, empty pop-up space in a trendy neighborhood in Queen Street West. She didn't call it a shop, she called it an installation. She titled the event, The Altar of Exchange, from the Sun to the Snow. She decorated the space with black and white photos of the Abuja market next to the finished Italian gowns. She played Afrobeat slowed down to a soulful tempo. She didn't just sell clothes, she invited people to see the journey of a woman who had traded everything for herself. On the first day, only 3 people walked in. On the second day, 10. On the third day, a woman with silver hair and a sharp, discerning eye walked in. She was a senior editor for a major Canadian fashion magazine. She stayed for 2 hours, not talking, just touching the fabrics and reading the storyboards. That evening, the editor posted a thread on social media. I found a soul in a basement on Queen Street. Felicia of the Altar is doing something the fashion world has forgotten. She is weaving resilience into silk. This isn't just a brand, it's a reclamation. By the next morning, the line for the pop-up wrapped around the block. Women in Canada were tired of quiet clothes. They wanted the fire Felicia brought. They wanted the structure of her blazers and the boldness of her prints. Felicia stood in the center of the chaos, her hands moving as she pinned a gown for a customer. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it for 3 hours. When she finally checked it, it wasn't a bank alert. It was a message from a number she didn't recognize. Felicia, the family said you are in Canada. Please, I'm out of the cell, I have nothing, just tell me how you did it. I want to be better. Felicia didn't delete the message. She just looked at it and felt nothing, not even pity. Anthony was a ghost in a haunted house she no longer lived in. The success of the pop-up caught the attention of a major Canadian department store. They wanted a permanent, the altar, section in their flagship location. We want you to launch it with a gala, the representative told her. The theme is resilience. We want you to tell your story. Felicia sat in her now proper studio, looking at the invitation. She thought about the altar of exchange. She had exchanged a husband for a career, a home for a dream, and a reputation for a reality. The studio was silent, save for the hum of the sewing machine. Felicia worked through the night, her fingers dancing over a fabric that was a marvel of engineering, waterproof silk in a deep midnight indigo. She was constructing a cape gown, a garment that looked like a protective shield but flowed like a royal train. As she stitched the final gold thread into the collar, she realized she wasn't just making a dress, she was making an armor. The divine relocation was almost complete. She wasn't just in Ontario physically, she was in a new state of mind. She was no longer a victim of a side chick or a card alert. She was the architect of a new world. The Toronto skyline glittered outside the glass walls of the gala venue. The room was filled with the elite of Canadian fashion, venture capitalists, and high society influencers. In the center of the hall stood a mannequin wearing the umbrella crown gown. Felicia stepped onto the stage, the spotlight finding her. She didn't look like the woman who had cried in a Guerimpa kitchen. She looked like a monument. Many people ask me how I moved my life from a boutique in Abuja to a flagship in Toronto. She began, her voice steady and resonant. They think it was a business plan, but it was actually a moment of exchange. I stood at an altar where I had to decide if I would continue to fund my own destruction or if I would invest in my own resurrection. She didn't mention Anthony by name, but she spoke of the alert, the divine interruption that exposes the rot so the foundation can be rebuilt. When she finished, the room didn't clap immediately. There was a profound, holy silence. Then the applause broke like thunder. After the gala, Felicia retreated to the green room. Her phone was flooded with congratulatory messages and business offers, but one notification stood out. It was a link to a news blog from Nigeria. The fall of a fake king. Anthony Alabi evicted from one-room apartment in Gwagwalada. She clicked the link. There was a grainy photo of Anthony. He was standing on a dusty street, clutching a single plastic bag, the same one Musa had packed for him months ago. His face was gaunt, the arrogance replaced by a hollow, wandering stare. Cynthia was nowhere to be found. She had moved on to the next king, leaving Anthony to drown in the vacuum of his own lies. Felicia felt a soft tug of memory, but it didn't hurt. It was like looking at a garment she had outgrown. She recognized it, but it no longer fit her life. She closed the tab and put the phone face down. The exchange was final. Months later, Felicia stood in front of her permanent store in downtown Toronto. The sign was simple but bold, the altar. Emeka stood beside her holding a bottle of champagne. "You did it, Felicia. You're not just a survivor, you're a pioneer." "I didn't do it alone, Emeka," she said, looking at her brother. "I did it because someone believed in me when my own house was a war zone, and because I chose to believe the no I heard in Abuja was actually God saying not here." A young Nigerian woman, a student at the University of Toronto, walked up to her with a look of awe. "Madam Felicia, I followed your story from the beginning. I just wanted to say, thank you. My boyfriend just took my savings to buy a car and I was going to let it go. But after seeing you, I went to the bank today and changed my signature." Felicia hugged the girl. "Don't just change your signature, my dear, change your destination." Felicia didn't just move across an ocean, she moved across a boundary of the soul. She learned that a man who uses your card to buy his mistress a life is not a man, he is a lesson. Anthony stayed in the dust because he loved the image of power more than the person who gave it to him. Felicia rose in the snow because she understood that her value was never in her husband's pocket, but in her own hands. Remember this, God will sometimes allow a Cynthia to walk into your shop just so you can see who is really holding the card. Don't be afraid of the alert. It is not a notification of loss. It is an invitation to your divine relocation.